Hey, what's going on YouTube? It's CJ. I want to welcome you guys back to episode 20. I'm a 120 gallon reef build. We got a lot to cover, so let's go ahead and jump right into this one. Now, for anyone that's new to my channel, this is a standard 120 gallon 4 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot aquarium. Now, I've been running this thing for around 8 months, and that's pretty much my 8 months of water changes, siphoning the sand bed, turning it over, and trying to keep it from trapping all the detritus and the bad stuff you don't want in your tank. Now, I started off with 90 pounds of the Tropic Eden Tonga Flake sand, which is the 2mm grain size, and by all accounts, it's been working great. It doesn't cause sandstorms when I turn the gyros up, and it's small enough for my sand sifting critters, gobies. It's small enough for my wrasslers to bury themselves. By all accounts, it's a fantastic sand. The issue is I had too much of it, guys. The ultimate goal was just to have around an inch, maximum throughout the tank for aesthetic value, and just so it looks good and it's easy to maintain. Unfortunately, I ended up with, patches of 3 inches and almost 4 inches deep of sand throughout my tank. And as you guys can imagine, it was just a pain to maintain. So the easy fix was just to remove it. Now, I removed roughly 35 pounds of sand over the course of a week and a half. Didn't want to do this all at once because, sand definitely is a home for majority of the bacteria in your tank. I didn't want to cause a mini cycle or a spike in parameters. So overall, the change went well. Didn't have any additional issues as far as livestock or ammonia spikes. So I definitely am glad I decided to make that move. So, food for thought. It's always easier to deal with less sand. So whenever you're in doubt, just add less than you think you need. Now, when it comes to my filtration, for anyone that's new to my channel, this was set up and designed 8, 9, 10 months ago. Nothing has changed. It's a very simple system. I'm over filtering my tank with a ton of pond matrix media. I also have an algae scrubber, a calcium reactor, and a skimmer. That's it. Now, when it comes to the algae scrubber, very significant right now because if you guys remember a few months ago, I had a huge issue with my main display completely outcompeting and killing my algae scrubber. Since then, I turned the lights down. I've been slowly walking them up, and I'm back to where I need my lights to be for corals, so I'm really keeping a close eye on it. When it comes to the calcium reactor, just been running with water, guys. Just, in neutral at this point because I didn't have corals. But that's going to be changing very, very soon. I got a CO2 tank filled, so that'll be a separate video. I'll show you guys how I set that thing up. So another bit of food for thought for everyone watching. Check the temperatures on your tank. I think this is one of the most overlooked things on our systems. And for me, having an Apex controller really saved me in this situation. If you guys noticed, the Finex thermostat set 82 degrees. Now that is the temperature of my actual sump, but keep in mind, and this is probably the same situation with a lot of people in the hobby, your sump temperature does not necessarily mean that's your display's temperature. So in my situation, I have my main display, draining into the first chamber, and I wanted to read the main display's parameters, so I put my probes in that chamber. And would you believe it? It ended up saving me, meaning my main temperature in my display was actually reading 5 to 6 degrees less than what my sump was. So I ended up getting alerts one day and my temperature had fell all the way down to 73, almost 72 degrees due to the temperature change outside and the weather change. And I never would have known it by looking at that Finex heater. So, the moral of this story is check the temperature in your display and your sump. And if it requires you to, make your sump a little hotter for your display to warm up, then that's what you got to do. Now, keep in mind, this is a situation that could have been avoided if I, checked this regularly, but this is also a situation where the Apex came through for the win. So definitely a value in a tank controller. Now, a few of the things I want to point out to you guys has to be the microfauna and tube worms and all the little things I'm noticing pop up all over my sump. And I mean everywhere, not just in my sump and my display. This is definitely a great sign of my tank maturing, and all those little crustaceans and critters and bugs and whatever else that are beneficial for your tank are starting to thrive and starting to populate and starting to establish themselves in my 120 gallon system. So definitely a good sign. I'm looking forward to seeing what other little critters pop up down the road. Now, something else I've been doing, I'm not going to cover in this video, it's going to be bubble scrubbing. That's what that little wood block is, so that's a topic for another day. So let's get out of this sump, and I'm going to show you guys the Apex, the display, and then what you want to see, the corals. You know, a lot of times in this hobby, when your equipment's working, you tend to kind of forget about it or not pay attention to it. Pretty much been the story for this 2016 Neptune Apex. You know, the last 4 months, been running flawlessly, no issues, so nothing really too bad to say about it. Until this weekend, you know, I really kind of blame myself for this. You know, I had this outlet set to on. It wasn't being used, and I was, you know, blowing detritus out of my tank and decided to plug a power head into an outlet that was already set on the Apex. Unfortunately, a spark, GFC outlet triggering, and the whole tank went dark. So, you know, I don't know if this is just a, you know, personal problem I had with mine or just the electricity in my house, but I'll tell you, moving forward, I would not recommend anyone to plug a device into an outlet on the EB8 controller with it being turned on, meaning disable it, plug in your device, and then enable it through Fusion or whatever you got to do. But I'm not plugging in any hot outlets again on this Apex. But other than that, you know, after a scare, I ended up rebooting, ended up working, and I did end up blowing it up, but I definitely want to share that with everyone. Now, when it comes to my auto top off, the Apex does also control it. You know, it's got basically a 5-gallon bucket with a maxi jet. This will need to get upgraded because, you know, it's only lasted me 4 to 5 days tops now since it's winter. And of course, I got my 5-pound CO2 container waiting to be hooked up to my calcium reactor. So, you know, this is pretty much the brains of the operation on the left side of the tank. My control board, Apex, gyro controller, you know, J-Bolt controller. This is pretty much what runs my system. You know, for those that have been subscribed and watching this build from the beginning, I appreciate you guys, you know, staying patient and enjoying this journey with me. You know, a lot of work went into this, you know, including selling my last tank to fund it, and then, you know, redoing the sump, the floating canopy, you know, the aquascaping, the cycling of the tank, and even worse, dealing with the downfalls, the issues, you know, the algae issues, the ick, the fish dying, and even worse, you know, not having time to maintain the tank. You know, all of those are situations to where if you're not committed or you don't want to see it through, easily you could have bowed out and just quit and just disappeared. So, you know, at the end of the day, we persevered, and I say we because it's my tank, but I think we all are rooting for this to be successful, and I'm glad that we have finally reached this point. So with that being said, you know, I'm gonna get you guys up to date on all the livestock, the corals and everything new that's in the system. Now, as you guys know, I have around 8 or 9 wrasses in my tank, and so far I've been very lucky, except when it comes to the bluehead wrasse. He has made a purpose to hunt down and destroy any and every hermit crab he can get his mouth on. As you guys can tell, he's very, very efficient, scary efficient, to the point to where I almost don't want to add any more hermit crabs. But with that being said, you never know what survives. And it wasn't until I looked at the tank at night and I found all the guys that were smart, meaning the ones that hid in their shells, hid in the rock work, didn't expose themselves during the times the wrasses were swimming around hunting. And these guys are actually everywhere in the system. So, you know, luckily, you know, my conch snails, my hermit crabs, my, you know, trochus snails, emerald crabs, my Nosira snails, all of those guys are somehow still surviving all the predators in the tank. So it's definitely an encouraging thing, but it also means that, you know, I got to be selective when I add these things to the system, primarily doing it at night when things are sleeping, and hoping that I can keep this population big enough for everything to keep, you know, eating my algae and keeping things in check as far as my cleanup crew. So definitely something to think about. If you're curious, you can keep a cleanup crew with wrasses, but you're going to suffer some casualties. You know, besides the hermit crabs being under constant danger, I was really happy to find out that I could add shrimp to the tank. And I definitely was nervous putting them in. You know, the reef lobster, the Sally Lightfoot crab, the fire shrimp, the cleaner shrimp, all of these guys were put in nervously, and I was really watching to make sure they didn't get killed. And I'm glad that I'll be able to count on these guys as part of my cleanup crew and be able to add a bunch more, you know, whether it's 3, 4, 5 cleaner shrimp, a few fire shrimp. Every one of these guys has a job to do, and I'm glad I can actually have a decent cleanup crew in this tank with all these wrasses. And believe it or not, guys, I actually have not had a lid on my tank for the last 4 months. Have not had any jumpers. It's either a situation where the fish I have are not jumpers, or what I actually think is going on is this gyro flow pattern and the amount of surface turbulence and agitation is actually preventing these guys from jumping. So either way, I like the look of a rimless, topless tank, and I'm gonna keep rolling the dice, and I'll let you guys know if this ends up backfiring on me. So at this point, stock list for the 120 gallon Reef is almost complete. The latest addition is gonna be a Starry Blenny. Never had one of these guys, but I'll tell you, ton of personality, and this guy definitely is a voracious eater of algae, so a great addition to my cleanup crew for the tank. Now, I can't figure out why my Tamini tank hates him so much and constantly chases him, but those guys will work out their differences. The only other maintenance fish I'm looking for is going to be some kind of sand sifting goby. Not sure what kind, not sure if I'm going to get a pair of them or a pistol shrimp, but I will get something to help maintenance this Sandbed, especially since it's only an inch deep, half inch, and it should be easy for them to turn over completely in the system. Now, last but not least, going to be adding some clownfish. But I didn't want to add clownfish until I had an anemone, which I have finally found after weeks of searching. So let's take a look at the corals in the tank, and I'll share what the plans are going to be for them. Now, this red rose bubble tipped anemone is pretty much the biggest anemone I've ever owned or purchased in the hobby. Guy's roughly 10 to 15 inches across, and what you guys are seeing is only a third of him sticking his head out from underneath that rock. So the good news is I found a rose bubble tipped anemone. The bad news is I'm not sure if he's going to stay there forever. So the plan was to point a power head at him and get him to move where I wanted him right away. That unfortunately failed, so I'm going to leave that guy there and just let him own that left structure until he finds his happy spot. After that, we can move forward with planting corals around him, but for now, I'm happy I have an anemone, tons of flow, tons of, size and color. It'll be perfect to host a clownfish whenever I add them to the tank. Now, besides anemones, my next favorite coral has to be Euphyllia corals. I just love the movement. I love any movement in a tank. Any coral that can sway, I rock with it. Now, the one I'm showing you right now, it's going to be a green torch coral. I just move this guy as I'm slowly, poking and probing and testing different spots in the tank for flow and light to try to see what the best spot's going to be for this guy. So for now, he appears to be okay, and we'll see what the future holds. Now, the right side of my tank is quickly becoming one of the favorite views of my system. If you look closely on the left, you can see the anemone far on the other end of the system, the overhang, the peaks as you come closer, and then you have the corals. So definitely is a unique perspective of the system, and I'm going to make sure I put corals in a position to where it doesn't completely obstruct the view from end to end, but at the same time gives you a nice layout as far as the way I want it to look. So with that being said, 2 additional corals are on this side. One is going to be a huge colony of frog spawn, which I've actually already fragged and put a few heads into the nano at work. I'll show you guys a nano another day. And I also have another purple torch. As you guys remember, the JBJ, I had a huge colony of purple torch in there, and I'm glad to have found another one. When it comes to these corals, now that I'm adding them again, I really kind of regret getting rid of all of the corals I had, because there's no guarantee you're going to find it again. And that's a lesson that I'm always going to take moving forward. If I ever move systems or break down a system, I'm going to try to hang on to as many corals as possible for the next tank. So at this point, you guys can consider yourselves completely updated on all the new additions in the 120 gallon Reef. Now, unfortunately, I was not able to record my entire process as far as dipping and treating my corals, fragging the frog spawn, or even super gluing them in the tank. But I will cover that in a later video. That's the great thing about having a system this size. There's plenty of opportunity for adding corals and documenting that for you. But just in case anyone was curious, I do dip my corals in Revive Dip, and I do normally use super glue instead of putty. Putty is a situation where it's permanent, it's hard to move, and I need things fluid in this system. As I'm adding pieces here and there, moving things around and visually trying to complete this tank in my mind, I need the freedom to be able to move corals, and super glue gel is the best way to do that. So what can you guys expect? Well, in the very, very near future, the calcium reactor will definitely be online this week. I'm gonna try to get a video out on that as soon as possible with how I tune it and how I get it set and test my parameters to make sure it's right. I'll definitely cover that in a future video. And then of course, SPS cores. I know a lot of you guys are wondering, what's up, what kind of cores you're going to have. SPS will be added to the system next week, a bunch of different types. I'll definitely cover that when the time comes as well. So, the tank is finally out of neutral officially. We are driving into 2018, and I'm definitely liking the direction the tank's going. And I'm starting to get that itch and that bug, feeling like, this tank just might be the best one I've created yet. So with that being said, we're gonna go ahead and stop this video here. I've been rambling on long enough. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed, the quick preview of what's to come in the 120 gallon Reef. So as always, hey, you guys can like, comment, subscribe. You guys keep doing what y'all do. Y'all be easy. Happy reefing. Peace.